The village of Umuokwe, nestled in the heart of the Igbo land, was known for its vibrant culture and unwavering faith in tradition. It was here that Adaobi, the only child of her humble parents, grew up under the watchful gaze of a loving community. Adaobi's father, a farmer, and her mother, a basket weaver, worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Though they lacked material wealth, their home was rich with the values of integrity, hard work, and a profound fear of God. Adaobi was a vision of beauty and grace, with deep brown eyes that sparkled like the morning dew and skin as radiant as the golden suns of the Niger River. Her charm was matched only by her humility and devotion to her family. In the evenings, she could be found singing hymns with her parents, her voice carried through the village like a balm of peace. Despite their struggles, her parents understood the power of education. They sold their prized yam harvest and wove baskets late into the night to afford her tuition at St. Agnes College, an all-girls institution with a reputation for producing intelligent and disciplined women. "Adaobi, you are the light of our family," her father told her the night before her departure. "Hold on to God, and no storm will dim your shine." The day of her departure was both joyous and somber. The entire village gathered to bid her farewell, offering gifts of fruit, beads, and heartfelt prayers. Adaobi clung to her mother, whose still, strict face betrayed the pride and fear she felt in equal measure. "Remember who you are," her mother whispered. "The world is vast, but our God is bigger. Never forget the values we taught you." Adaobi's arrival at St. Agnes was nothing short of overwhelming. The sprawling campus, filled with tall buildings and well-dressed students, was a stark contrast to the simplicity of Umuokwe. She was assigned a roommate, Nkem, a confident and charismatic girl who seemed to know everything about the school. Nkem took an instant liking to Adaobi, showing her around and introducing her to new friends. But there was something unsettling beneath the surface of this vibrant new world. Adaobi noticed how some girls seemed to gather in secretive clusters, whispering in harsh tones and exchanging knowing glances. Late at night, she would hear faint chants and rhythmic drumming coming from an unknown corner of the campus. When she asked Ngem about it, her roommate simply laughed. "Oh, Adaobi, you'll soon get used to it. Every school has its quirks." Adaobi brushed it off, determined to focus on her studies. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, her heart couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The warmth of her upbringing and her faith seemed like distant memories in this strange and alluring environment. Little did she know that her journey at St. Agnes was about to challenge everything she held dear. St. Agnes College was an architectural masterpiece. Its towering walls, covered in ivy, stood like a fortress of tradition and knowledge. But despite its serene facade, Adaobi couldn't shake the feeling that something lay hidden beneath its surface. A whisper of secrets seemed woven into the very fabric of its existence. Adaobi's first week was a whirlwind of lectures, introductions, and adjusting to the new environment. Nkem, her roommate, quickly became her guide and confidant. With her headstrong voice and sharp wit, Nkem was magnetic, a natural leader who always seemed to be at the center of every group. She took Adaobi under her wing, introducing her to the social circles that ruled the campus. But the school wasn't just a place for academics or friendship. It had its own unspoken hierarchy. Late at night, when the world outside was silent, the campus would come alive with an eerie pause. Adaobi would often wake to the faint sound of rhythmic drumming, muffled whispers, and the flicker of candlelight in the distance. "What's that noise?" she asked Ngem one night. "Oh, it's probably just some girls doing their silly rituals," Nkem replied dismissively. "You know, traditions and all that. Don't worry about it." But worry, Adaobi did. She had grown up in a home where spiritual matters were taken seriously, and the unsettling feeling in her chest refused to go away. One afternoon, as Adaobi walked back to her dormitory, she noticed a small group of girls huddled under a tree. Their laughter was light and carefree, but their eyes told a different story. One of them, a striking girl named Amara, caught Adaobi staring and flashed her an enigmatic smile. "Adaobi, right? You should join us sometime," Amara called out. "Join you for what?" Adaobi asked, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Oh, "You'll see," Amara replied, her voice dripping with mischief. "It's enlightening." That night, Nkem invited Adaobi to a gathering. "It's just a study circle," she said, "a chance to unwind and connect with other girls. You've been so uptight lately. You need to loosen up." Adaobi hesitated but eventually agreed. The meeting was held in a secluded part of the campus, in an old, candlelit room that smelled faintly of burnt herbs. The girls greeted her warmly, their laughter and easy camaraderie putting her at ease. They spoke of empowerment, loyalty, and breaking free from societal expectations. Adaobi, who had always felt the weight of her village's hopes on her shoulders, found their words intoxicating. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted. The girls began chanting in a language Adaobi didn't recognize, their voices growing louder and more rhythmic. Nkem handed her a carved wooden object, instructing her to repeat certain words. The room seemed to spin as Adaobi, feeling a strange pull, complied. When it was over, she felt a mix of exhilaration and unease. "Welcome, Adaobi," Amara whispered, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "You're one of us now." Adaobi smiled weakly, but a chill ran down her spine. She had taken a step into a world she didn't fully understand, and there would be no turning back. The days following the gathering were a blur for Adaobi. She couldn't stop replaying the events of that night, the chants, the strange object, and Amara's hauntingly cryptic smile. Yet, to her surprise, she began feeling a newfound sense of belonging. For the first time, she wasn't just the naive girl from Umuokwe. She was part of something larger, something secretive and powerful. The group, calling themselves the Sisters of the Veil, soon became a constant in her life. They invited her to sit with them during meals, included her in private discussions, and treated her as one of their own. Nkem and Amara, in particular, were always by her side. Filling her days with laughter and camaraderie, it felt like a family, an intoxicating escape from the pressures of academic life and the expectations her family back home had placed on her. However, not everything about the Sisters of the Veil was comforting. Their meetings grew more frequent and more intense. The rituals, which initially seemed like harmless bonding exercises, took on a darker tone. During one gathering, Adaobi noticed Amara sprinkling a red powder into the flames of a burning candle, causing it to flare unnaturally high. "What's in the powder?" Adaobi asked, her voice trembling slightly. Amara smiled, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling confidence. "Knowledge and power, things you wouldn't understand yet." Adaobi tried to laugh it off, but her worries deepened. She began noticing changes in herself. Her prayers, once fervent and filled with faith, now felt hollow. The hymns she used to sing with her parents echoed in her mind like distant memories, overshadowed by the chants of the sisters. Even her dreams turned dark, filled with shadowy figures and ancestral voices she couldn't decipher. One evening, as she prepared for bed, Nkem sat beside her with a sly grin. "Adaobi, I've been meaning to ask, do you feel different?" "Stronger." Adaobi hesitated. "I don't know. I feel confused. What exactly are we doing in these gatherings?" Nkem's smile faltered, replaced by a cold, piercing gaze. "We are changing the world, Adaobi. We are freeing ourselves from the chains of judgment and tradition. But you have to trust the process. If you don't, you'll never truly understand." That night, Adaobi received her first task as a member of the group. She was to approach one of the younger students, a shy girl named Chidinma, and recruit her into the fold. The idea made her stomach churn, but the pressure from Nkem and the others was overwhelming. "If you don't bring her in," Amara warned, "you'll never rise in the sisterhood, and trust me, staying at the bottom is dangerous." Adaobi reluctantly approached Chidinma the next day, within a tale of sisterhood and empowerment. Chidinma, wide-eyed and trusting, agreed to attend a meeting. As Adaobi watched the younger girl nod enthusiastically, a pang of guilt stabbed her heart. That night, during the initiation, Adaobi saw something she couldn't ignore. As Chidinma repeated the ritual words, her eyes glazed over, and she collapsed to the floor. The other sisters laughed it off, but Adaobi's instinct screamed that something was deeply wrong. When the meeting ended, Adaobi slipped away from the group and returned to her room, trembling. Staring at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the girl looking back at her. "What have I become?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face, but it was too late to turn back. The transformation in Adaobi was becoming more pronounced, and those around her began to notice. At home, her parents commented on how distant and cold she seemed during their occasional phone calls. Her mother, ever perceptive, asked if she was still praying every night. Adaobi always lied, forcing a laugh as she assured her mother that her faith was as strong as ever. But deep down, Adaobi felt the cracks in her spirit widening. The once vivid memories of family prayers and her father's wise words seemed like shadows barely clinging to her consciousness. At college, the Sisters of the Veil continued to exert their influence. Amara and Nkem became more demanding, expecting Adaobi to lead new recruits and participate in increasingly elaborate rituals. One evening, during a particularly tense meeting, the sisters performed a ceremony unlike anything Adaobi had seen before. The room was filled with the scent of burning herbs and a strange, pulsating energy. Amara stood in the center, holding an ancient-looking staff adorned with symbols that Adaobi didn't recognize. "We are the chosen," Amara proclaimed, her voice echoing as if amplified by an unseen force. "Through us, the old ways rise again. Through us, we reclaim the power stolen by those who seek to control us." The other girls cheered, their voices bending into a cacophony that made Adaobi's head spin. As the ceremony progressed, Amara approached Adaobi and handed her a dagger with an intricately carved handle. "Prove your loyalty," Amara whispered. Adaobi stared at the dagger, her hands trembling. "What do you mean?" she asked. Amara smiled, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Every sister must make a sacrifice. It's the only way to ascend." The room fell silent, the weight of expectation pressing down on Adaobi. She could feel the eyes of the group boring into her, waiting for her to act. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, but there was none. With a shaky breath, she placed the dagger on the altar, refusing to carry out whatever dark act they had planned. Amara's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "Weakness," she hissed, "but we'll let it slide this time." "You'll learn soon enough, Adaobi." After the ceremony, Adaobi returned to her room, her heart pounding. Nkem confronted her there, her demeanor more sinister than ever. "Do you think you can defy the sisterhood?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "There are consequences for betrayal, Adaobi. Don't make us regret bringing you in." That night, Adaobi had a dream. She stood in a dense forest, surrounded by shadows that whispered her name. Suddenly, an elderly woman with a weathered face emerged from the darkness. "You are treading a dangerous path," the woman said, her voice firm but kind. "Return to your roots before it's too late." When Adaobi awoke, the dream lingered in her mind, but even as she wrestled with her doubts, she felt trapped. The Sisters of the Veil had woven their web around her, and escaping seemed impossible. Yet, in the depths of her heart, a small spark of hope began to flicker. Adaobi's life began to spiral into chaos. The once simple girl who had arrived at St. Agnes College with dreams of academic success was now entangled in a dark web of secrecy and fear. The sisterhood's hold on her was tightening, and every attempt to resist seemed futile. The guilt of recruiting Chidinma weighed heavily on her, and the memory of the girl collapsing during the ritual haunted her dreams. Back at home, her parents' concerns grew. Her mother called one evening, her voice laced with worry. "Adaobi, my daughter, are you all right? You sound distant." "I'm fine, Mama," Adaobi lied, her voice shaking. "School is just stressful, that's all." Her father took the phone, his deep voice steady and reassuring. "Remember, Adaobi, no matter where you are, God is with you. If there's anything troubling you, come home. We will face it together." His words struck a chord, but Adaobi couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. How could she explain the shadowy rituals, the ominous warnings, or the growing fear that she was losing herself? At school, the tension with the sisterhood reached a boiling point. During one of their gatherings, Kem pulled her aside and said, her tone cold and sharp, "You've been holding back. If you're not with us fully, you're against us. And trust me, being against us is dangerous." Adaobi's heart raced. She was beginning to understand just how far the sisterhood's influence stretched. They weren't just a group of rebellious girls. They were something much, much darker, much older, steeped in an ancient power she didn't fully understand. Her breaking point came when she received a surprise visit from the village pastor, Reverend Isi. He had been invited to the college to give a lecture on faith and morality. But when he saw Adaobi in the audience, he knew something was wrong. After the lecture, he pulled her aside and said gently, his eyes searching her, "You are not the same girl I saw last time. Your spirit is troubled." Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. "I'm fine, Reverend, truly." But Reverend Isi wasn't convinced. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever darkness you are facing, remember that no evil is greater than God. Come home, child, there is still time." That night, Adaobi sat alone in her room, clutching a small Bible her mother had packed in her suitcase. For the first time in weeks, she opened it and her eyes fell on a verse, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Her moment of reflection was cut short when a knock came at her door. It wasn't Kim. It was flanked by two other sisters. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and dangerous. They led her to the meeting room, where Amara stood waiting. "Adaobi," Amara said, her tone cold. "I see we've heard whispers you've been talking to outsiders. Do you know what happens to traitors?" Adaobi felt her chest tighten. She was trapped, caught between her growing faith and the unrelenting grip of the sisterhood. As the girls closed in around her, she realized that the time for escape was running out. Adaobi's heart pounded as the sisters surrounded her, their faces shadowed by the flickering light of the ritual candles. Amara stepped forward, her piercing eyes looking onto Adaobi. "We trusted you," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "But now we hear you've been talking to people outside the sisterhood, Reverend Isi, of all people. Tell me, Adaobi, have you forgotten the vows you made?" "I haven't betrayed anyone," Adaobi replied, her voice trembling but defiant. "I just needed clarity. I'm trying to understand what this all means." Amara's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Oh, we'll help you understand." At her signal, two of the girls seized Adaobi by the arms and forced her to her knees. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with tension. "You've forgotten what binds us," Amara continued. "Tonight we remind you." She raised the said staff, and the other girls began chanting in a language Adaobi couldn't comprehend. The room darkened, and the shadows on the walls seemed to take on a life of their own, twisting and writhing like living creatures. Adaobi's fear reached a fever pitch as she realized the sisterhood's power wasn't just metaphorical, it was real, and it was terrifying. As the ritual intensified, Adaobi felt an overwhelming pressure in her chest, as though unseen hands were gripping her heart. Her vision blurred, and she saw flashes of her parents' faces, her father's kind smile and her mother's tearful eyes. A voice echoed in her mind, soft but firm. "Stand strong, Adaobi. You are not alone." Summoning every ounce of courage, Adaobi interrupted the ritual, her voice cutting through the chanting. "No," she shouted, her words ringing with unexpected strength. "I won't be part of this anymore." The room fell silent, the candles flickering violently as if responding to her defiance. Amara stared at her, a mix of shock and fury on her face. "You don't get to leave," she hissed. "You're bound to us, Adaobi. You swore an oath." Adaobi struggled to her feet, her resolve hardening. "I may have made a mistake, but I will not let it define me. Whatever power you think you have, it's nothing compared to the God I serve." Amara's laughter was